around Biloxi. Its current coordinates here at 30.5 north, 88.9 west. Winds 45 miles per hour, moving somewhat to the south-southeast around 5. Pressure 2909 inches of mercury at 985 millibars. Things had a long life. Again, now has been downgraded to a tropical storm to talk about. Hurricane Jeanne. It continues to move on to the northeast around 21 miles per hour with 90 mile per hour sustained winds. 500 miles to the west-southwest of the Azores. May continue to move on and weaken slightly, and eventually in about 36 to 48 hours should be declared an extratropical.
Miles an hour, painfully slow, and that's adding to the rainfall problem. It's just north of Biloxi as of 1 o'clock Central Daylight Time, and pressure 972 millibars is up. With the weakening, you would expect the central pressure to be up. As you can see, it's the only game in town in the south, and it's not moving very quickly. And we have had crews on the Gulf Coast from New Orleans onward through Pensacola last night and now Mobile, Alabama. And we have Kristen Dodd talking to us from Mobile. I hope she will dry out someday, but she hasn't yet today. Kristen, how are things going?
Oh, you've got it, Micah. We really have not been able to dry out at all over the past 48 hours. And here in Mobile, the story is the same, as we have seen torrential downpours and also quite a bit of storm surge. About 2 blocks behind me is Mobile Bay and Mobile River, and that is continuing to be quite flooded, already over 1.5 streets, and it's about 5 or 6 feet deep in that area. Also, we're looking at some flooded rivers, and that is causing a big problem and will continue to cause a problem as we see the heavy rain. So we're looking for flooded rivers to now become the focus of attention with Hurricane George. Now with me now is Barbara Giles, and she is with the American Red Cross. Can you tell me a little bit about how the American Red Cross has been helping people all up and down the Gulf Coast?
Yes, currently we have over 220 shelters open across the Gulf Coast. And as last night we were housing more than 30,000 people.
And here in Mobile, what is the situation been?
Well, as the rain continues to fall and the waters rise, we're seeing people coming into shelters that had not previously evacuated.
And if someone is at home and they're able to see this and they think that they are needing to evacuate, who should they contact?
Well, they can contact their local authorities. They know where the shelters are, or they can contact the Red Cross chapter here in Mobile.
And if they are going to evacuate, what can they expect to find at these shelters?
If they have time to collect items to bring with them, they will want to bring any necessary medical supplies, prescription medications. If you're bringing children, bring something for them to do, a good book. They could be sitting for quite some time, and bring batteries and flashlights because the electricity has been going off and on throughout the city.
This has been a very big hurricane season. What kind of a toll is that taking on the American Red Cross?
Well, we're estimating that it's going to be about $50 million for the hurricane season. We have operations just from Hurricane George going through the U.S. Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, the Keys, and now up along the Gulf Coast. We had over 350 shelters open in Florida alone over the past few days.
All right, thank you. So the American Red Cross would definitely love to have your donations. If you'd like to donate, the number is 1-800-HELP-NOW. Now let's go to Bill Keneally in New Orleans.
All right, Kristen, thanks a lot. Again, we're right here on the shore of Lake Pontchartrain. The winds are still howling, as you can tell, probably on the order of 55 to 60, maybe a little higher miles per hour. They are from the northwest today. To my left would be the seawall. That's normally the edge of Lake Pontchartrain right there. But you can see that the water is just crashing on shore. The waves are right now. And as we pan down the lake, we're heading back towards the west, back towards the Pontchartrain Causeway, which we could see a little while ago. It's probably about 2 miles down. In the foreground, I think you can probably see a marina back there too. This marina is a landmark restaurant there called Bruins, and they say it's withstood Hurricane Betsy and many hurricanes prior to that, but they say it's been very heavily damaged in this hurricane, Hurricane George. So there's a lot of high water here. Thankfully, the levees are holding. Everybody back behind the levees is safe. Their only problem is they've had no power since about 3 o'clock yesterday afternoon. So from here, we're going to turn it back to the Atlanta studios, and here's Dennis.
Thanks a lot, Bill. That's Bill Keneally on the levee, I believe, right on the shores of Lake Pontchartrain in New Orleans, Louisiana, getting hammered by gale force winds right now and very high water. John Hope, our tropical expert, we've seen this storm do all kinds of damage in the Caribbean, and it really slowed down as it approached the Gulf Coast.
That was kind of unfortunate in a way, because what it does, it allowed it that much more time to pound and that much more time for heavy rain to fall. And also, east of the center, a very persistent southerly wind that tends to keep the water in, especially back on the bay side and the upper parts of the bays.
Places like Mobile and Mobile Bay, the water just isn't going out.
Exactly, and as Bill Canida was just pointing out, even on Lake Pontchartrain, New Orleans certainly escaped the worst part of this hurricane, but still, that's a strong northwest wind there, and it's piling up a lot of water at this eastern, southern end of the lake.
Flooding kind of coming in through the back door.
Exactly.
Well, we have a satellite picture that we could show you, and an imposing shot of a storm that's not moving very rapidly, maybe just drifting to the north and northeast as very heavy rain falls through this entire area, John.
Well, it is moving, though, and I'm very glad to see that. And the reason I say that, Mike, is that I know if it moves inland a little more, it will weaken even more rapidly. It's weakened fairly rapidly anyway. It had about a 962 pressure at landfall, and now it's up quite a bit, and the winds are dying down. I think hurricane-force winds themselves are kind of confined now to the Gulf area out over the open water.
Right.
I doubt very much if there'd be any inland from this point on.
We're seeing gusts of 40 to 50 miles an hour, including Mobile Bay right now. And, well, we still have some heavy convection, some intense rainfall, as this red area would show. Very high and cold cloud tops mean extremely heavy rainfall in some areas.
And some of this, as we'll see when we show radar, extends well out east of where the circulation center is, Mike.
It seems like the center of that heavy rain area might be extending eastward. We like to see some movement.
Yes, it is. I certainly can say that this afternoon. We see a little more movement this afternoon than we have seen heretofore.
But at the major airports, some of the official rainfall estimates at the airports go up to a foot at Pensacola and 17, 18 inches in some parts of downtown Pensacola, with Eglin Air Force Base over 11 and Mobile up to 8 inches of rain, so extremely heavy rain there.
But we know that from the Doppler radar and also some other reports we're getting, these are just stations taking on actual observation points, that there's been much heavier accumulations of rain than that. In fact, we have one here in 24-hour out of Milton, Florida even, I noticed, 25 inches.
25.06 inches.
And that's a measured amount of rain.
Right, Milton, Florida, right about this area and here. Well, also the threat of tornadoes, and we had some tornado warnings in Pike and Crenshaw counties, Alabama, and a tornado confirmed in Panama City Beach shortly after noon today. 12 homes with roof damage and debris on roads from a tornado, not the hurricane itself.
And we can see some very nasty showers out there yet, thunderstorms, so more tornadoes certainly would not be surprising.
Now, some of our estimates now, our frame that we keep updating here every hour shows that the Doppler estimates since, we're looking since Saturday now, 23.3 inches of rain, mainly in this area between Alabama and Florida, and that reading at Milton, Florida would confirm that.
Yes, it would indeed. That's right in that area.
The rain's still pounding the area. The yellows and the oranges coming in with the heaviest rainfall, and even the threat of tornadoes in some of these cells.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to emphasize out here in these cells that are moving north, where you see the bright yellows and so on. These are very nasty showers and thunderstorms, and they could very well have some very nasty weather, as is this one here that's developing now just east of Mobile.
And of course our flash flood watches, which are representative of this whole storm. So now we're looking at less wind, but still some saltwater flooding coming in from that storm surge, and some heavy rainfall.
Some salt water, and then the fresh water, and that's what we want to emphasize. There again, this depends a whole lot on exactly how fast the storm moves. At the rate it's moving now, it's going to be plenty of time for a lot of rain to accumulate. We're hoping that it will speed up a little bit, and then the rain totals wouldn't be as great.
Okay, John Hope, thanks very much. We'll continue to keep you posted, and of course take all the precautions in flooding. Stay out of waters that are too high. Don't drive into those areas at all. Stay home is probably the best thing we could tell you right now. And if you're on the internet, it's weather.com for the latest and comprehensive information from the Weather Channel's website. Now back to the studio with Dennis Smith.
Thank you very much, Mike and John. And a reminder, the rest of this segment is sponsored by Travelers Insurance. As we look elsewhere across the country, much of the U.S. enjoying a very nice day. Very little in the way of any significant precipitation outside the shield of where the hurricane is in the southeast United States. As you can see definitely on the radar display, that's where the main name of the game is, right here in the deep south. In fact, there it is. You can see how the precipitation's fanning on up into Birmingham and Montgomery, and actually working its way into the Carolinas with a few bands of rain slipping on up towards the Asheville area. Warm temperatures have been the main story over the last 24 hours. The dots represent where record highs were achieved on Sunday, and even as we
Especially along the Gulf Coast, along with very heavy rain. Hello, welcome to Weather Center, and I'm Mike Bono. We're looking at Hurricane George winding down right now. In fact, we're expecting it to be classified down to a tropical storm status on the next advisory, but it has had a legacy across the Atlantic. Let's take a look at that. Leaving its calling card, unfortunately, its deadly calling card in some Caribbean islands, over 300 dead, and some billions of dollars, $2 billion or more of damage, most of that in Puerto Rico. But now, just north of Biloxi, Mississippi, as of 1 p.m., we'll have another advisory coming up in the next half hour for sure. 75-mile-an-hour winds at that time, and drifting north of 972 millibars should be up to the next time we get a reading. You know, the aircraft reservists don't go into these storms once they get over land. They can take reconnaissance observations over water. But much of the southeast United States covered with the clouds, and the heavy rain is near to the north and to the northeast of the center. We have had crews out there for days now getting hammered and battered by waves and winds and heavy rain. And on the Gulf Coast right now in Mobile Bay and downtown Mobile, we have Kristen Dodd, and Bill Keneally is still in New Orleans. Kristen, has the rain slowed down any?
Well, just when you think it's about to slow down and almost stop and the winds to subside, we must be caught in a bit of a rain band, because everything really has picked up here in the past 5 minutes. Very, very gusty winds and heavy torrential downpours. Behind me you can see what the storm surge has done coming out of Mobile Bay and up Water Street, ironically enough, and then proceeding along Government Street. It is about 5 to 6 feet deep now on some of those streets, and we have several cars that are trapped underwater. Also notice some of the damage the wind has done. We had a fence that is torn apart here. However, it is secured at this point. We also have had trees down, and you can see one of those there, and numerous trees down across the city. This has continued to be a problem with the trees being blown down on the power lines. Earlier we had a lot of fires being started, and the firefighters had to go out quite often. We also had a lot of reports of power outage, but some good news is we just now saw the street lights begin to come on, and that may be a sign that perhaps the power crews are out and about and getting some things at least a little bit back to normal. This heavy rain is going to continue to be a concern here in Mobile, because as we get the heavy rain on top of the storm surge, we could see more flooding, especially tomorrow in some of the rivers and lower lying areas. Now let's go to New Orleans, where we have our Bill Keneally standing by. Bill?
All right, Kristen, thanks a lot. We're here at the south end of Lake Pontchartrain, and as we surmised earlier today, the wind is an awful lot stronger out here on the waterfront. This is a northwest wind now. We're behind powerful Hurricane George. When I say that, we're on the western side, and this is typically the weaker side of the hurricane. I hate to see that very strong side. Let's take a look up the lake, if you will. At times you can see the Lake Pontchartrain Causeway. It's probably 2 to 3 miles up there. That roadway is still shut. In the foreground is a marina. And Mike, we do have knowledge now that a very famous landmark up there, the Bruins restaurant, evidently has been very heavily damaged by the pounding surf and also the incessant wind we've had the last couple of days. Anywhere left of that green strip of land that I was showing normally would be dry. This is an area, Mike, this is a roadway right behind me, Lakeshore Drive, that would normally be teeming with people by late afternoon, either rollerblading or just kind of hanging out in the park. But anything recreational here would have to have a boat associated with it. Back to you, Mike.
Well, thanks a lot, Bill. It looks very bad out there, considering the storm is letting up a bit and moving away. A worse day around New Orleans today than yesterday, to be sure. We've got John Hope with us, our tropical expert. John, we see a painfully slow movement, and this storm isn't giving up very easily at all.
But Mike, it is moving, and I'm very happy to see that, because that means it's going to continue to wind down, which it is doing. As you said at the outset, we anticipate the next advisory will lower this to a tropical storm. And I don't think we have any sustained hurricane force winds anymore, unless it would be in isolated spots out over the Gulf of Mexico. I don't think any winds inland are that strong now.
Certainly well developed, though. I remember when Hermine came on shore about a week ago, there was a circulation separated from the heavy rain and cloud. This one is still well put together.
It is well put together, and although the eye doesn't show up, but you certainly can see the circulation. And this is kind of typical down the Gulf of Mexico, because the terrain there is relatively flat. It doesn't have mountains to encounter, so the flow doesn't get distorted like it would over mountains or hills.
Well, we do have a reduction in wind, which is good, although in New Orleans we're reporting 33-mile-an-hour gusts. I would say Bill Keneally is probably in a more exposed location, getting the gusts maybe up to 50 where he is.
Right at the southern end of the lake, and oddly enough, Mike, the only wind we see here in excess of 50 miles an hour, the gust is all the way up at Jackson, Mississippi.
Interesting.
So those winds have really been fairly strong up there the last hour or two.
but safely below hurricane force, we're happy
Oh
to
yes,
say.
well below hurricane force.
The infrared photography shows some of the highest, coldest cloud tops that are linked to the heaviest rainfall, as you say, on the move to the east.
They are moving toward the northeast. Again, this rate isn't very rapid, but some movement is better than no movement.
Absolutely. And with that intensity of rainfall, we also have the potential of tornadoes coming in through a couple of different watch areas, Mississippi, Alabama, and the Florida Panhandle.
And we'll see in just a moment, Mike, some pretty vicious-looking thunderstorms showing up on the radar.
We did have a report of a tornado in Panama City earlier, Panama City Beach, 12 homes with roof damage shortly after noon, and tornado warnings right now in Alabama and Bullock and Barber County, so take cover right now. The rainfall at the airports, the major observations come in close to a foot in Pensacola, but we heard from Kristen Dodd that downtown they had up to 17, 18 inches of rain even before midnight last night. And this particular graphic shows as much as 23 inches of rain in the Florida Panhandle area coming through. A report out of Milton Forestry Service, Milton, Florida, with 25 inches of rain.
And that's a measured amount of rain there.
That's right, from an official hydrological measurement.
Yes, indeed.
And that might not be the last 2-foot rainfall measurement we hear about.
Oh, I'm afraid not, because lots more rain in the offing over some of these very same areas that have already had a lot.
Now we're looking at some of the intense echoes on radar coming in, and you are really worried that we may see more tornadoes out of these.
Oh, those are the ones I'm really concerned about in the short term, about producing some more tornadoes, so we'll have to watch that very carefully.
And of course the flooding goes on. This flash flood watch would be because of the rainfall and rivers getting backed up. This is freshwater flooding we're looking at.
That's right, and we need to be concerned eventually about the rivers. You know, most of the flooding we're talking about so far, the flash floodings, we're talking about small streams. But it takes the rivers a while to fill up, so these streams are going to be emptying into the rivers, and then we're going to have to be concerned about some river flooding as well.
And flooding, I think, is still the chief weather-related cause of death in the United States.
Well, yes, some of that storm surge flooding and some of it rainfall-induced flooding.
So we want to remind folks to stay at higher ground, get out of the low-lying areas, stay away from the high water areas, and keep the children definitely away from floodwaters. That is always a good thing to remember. Just stay home right now in this weather situation.
Well, everyone should stay put until they have the authorization to move from emergency managers, because if they're asked to stay put, there's a very good reason to do that.
Absolutely. You have something in your hand. I believe it's a later advisory.
This is the updated advisory, and it says a hurricane warning from Grand Isle, Louisiana to Destin has changed to tropical storm, and now a tropical storm warning is in effect from Grand Isle, Louisiana eastward to Destin, Florida. So this now is being downgraded at this time to a tropical storm.
So Tropical Storm George now with maximum winds 60 knots, which would be close to 70 miles an hour.
No, that's not far short of hurricane strength, but it's not hurricane strength.
Right. So we're going in the right direction.
We are.
John Hope, thank you very much. We'll be keeping you posted on the future, and now it seems like the high water that's along the coastline and some torrential downpours with flooding are our chief threats from Tropical Storm George. When you can't be at the TV set, if you're in front of the computer screen, it's weather.com on the internet. Now back to the studio with Dennis.
Thank you very much, Mike Bono and John Hope. And again, I'm glad to hear it's down to tropical storm status. A hurricane for 11 days. If you're thinking is anywhere near a record, I believe it was a couple of years ago, and I may be mistaken on the typhoon, but I think it was Typhoon John went 31 days as a hurricane, so it's nowhere near a record, but it's enough for anybody, I'm sure. Tropical storm George continues to impact the southeast with a lot of cloud cover elsewhere across the country, and pretty fine shape for a Monday. Just a few hit-and-miss showers, most of it concentrated with George in the deep south. That's showing up from Mobile to Birmingham along Interstate 65, Interstate 20, Interstate 10, a definite soaking. A few more showers have pushed on up against the mountains in North Carolina around Asheville to Boone. Temperatures continue to be quite warm. In fact, comparing them to normal, well above the mark, with record highs established yesterday across much of the Northeast. Summer-like values will continue in the deep south with some 90s. That's in the forecast for tomorrow. It's already 92 in Oklahoma City, 94 at Dallas. Let me cool you down. 71 at Green Bay and 71 coming in from Detroit. Our forecast will continue to watch George very carefully as it continues to move on off towards the northeast slowly. Looks like the rains will continue to grip the deep south. Look for a few...
You're now looking at pictures of Mobile, Alabama as Hurricane George continues to pound the area. Folks are still seeing wind gusts of more than 50 miles an hour at times, especially on the coast, and some very heavy rain in places. Hello, I'm Mike Bono. Welcome to this special edition of Weather Center. Hurricane George wreaking havoc from the central Atlantic through the Caribbean islands, and now looks like its final calling area is the Gulf Coast of the United States, but painfully slow, painfully slow. Let's take a look at our track right now, and the latest advisory as of 4 p.m. Central Daylight Time, now Tropical Storm George, just north of Biloxi, Mississippi, drifting, you could say, north of 3 miles an hour. Max winds 70 miles an hour, so it has fallen below hurricane strength officially for the first time since about here in the eastern Atlantic. That's entire distance it was rated as a hurricane, although it was only 75 miles an hour on Hispaniola for a time. The pressure, 975 millibars, estimated 2879 inches, as we're looking at a slow movement of intense rainfall underneath these heavy clouds, and that rain slowly spreading on toward the north and east, and it'll take a couple of days to play out that scenario. Well, we've had crews on the Gulf Coast for a couple of days. We've had Bill Keneally in New Orleans today getting hammered by heavy winds, and Kristen Dodd in Mobile, Alabama. We can now go to Kristen Dodd in downtown Mobile, Alabama. Kristen, does the water level seem to be changing any around you?
Well, we've been watching that very closely as we have seen that storm surge come in early this morning here in downtown Mobile. Looking behind me, we've been watching some of these levels, and we have not seen anything change whatsoever. The good news is that it's no longer getting higher. The bad news is that still seeing those strong southerly winds not allowing the excess water to retreat back into Mobile Bay. We've been watching also carefully the live truck from one of the local news stations that is stranded out in the middle of the area, and it's got about 3 or 4 feet of water around it, and that's kind of been our gauge as to how deep the water has been, and it is still at bumper level and no change in sight. We've also seen other cars that have been buried in water throughout Water Street, which runs the length here of downtown Mobile. As we were driving earlier this morning from Pensacola to Mobile, we saw quite a bit of damage as far as widespread trees being down. We also saw even worse flooding than what we are seeing here in downtown Mobile. Now, this is video that we shot earlier this morning, shot by my photographer Mark, and it was quite extensive at the causeway. Highway 98 that runs in and around the Mobile Bridge area is totally underwater, about 6 to 8 feet. Some of the signs were totally submerged. We weren't even sure that there was even a road there until we saw just the top of some of the lights sticking out from underneath the water. So that is definitely going to be a big problem there for quite some time. We also have had some problems farther to the west in New Orleans, and with more on that, here's our Bill Keneally.
All right, Kristen, thanks a lot. It's kind of a good news, bad news sort of an afternoon. The good news is the bulk of the rain appears to be over with. The bad news is with the hurricane off to our east, we're getting a northwest wind. It's coming in and rushing in off of Lake Pontchartrain, which is the south shore right behind me. The seawall about 10 feet behind me. Normally from there to the right would all be dry. You can see it's hardly the case today. This is normally a picnic area, a very popular spot. This is on Lakeshore Drive, right where Canal Boulevard would come in. And you look way down the lake, you can see the crashing nature of these waves, probably on the order of 3 to occasionally 5 or even 6 feet. And again, the lakefront, from north to south would be on the order of 30 miles. So it's amazing the ability of 30 miles of water, what kind of a surge and what kind of a wave it can produce. Incidentally, farther down the lake, again on the south shore, down around the Lakefront Airport, we've heard reports of as much as 3 to 7 feet of water in and around that Lakefront Airport, and evidently some people stranded down there. The good news is for all the neighborhoods back behind the levee, they're safe. The levee in no danger of breaching or any kind of wave action topping it. So from that perspective, we're in good shape. Still, though, a lot of power outages in the area. Now we'll turn it back to Mike Bono.
Thanks a lot, Bill, from the lake shore of Lake Pontchartrain in New Orleans, Louisiana. And interesting, this is a good test case for what a really intense hurricane would do to New Orleans. Thankfully, the city has been prepared, but it's caused enough damage as it is. Well, we've been talking to Lieutenant Colonel Ronnie Jones on the telephone for the last couple of days, and Lieutenant Jones has been working very hard on this situation. What's the latest from Louisiana, Lieutenant Colonel Ronnie Jones?
Thanks, Mike. We've got good mixed news and some bad news. The good news, of course, is that except for 4 parishes, I'll give you those in a moment, people can return home. The bad news is they're not going to get there right away. We're going to be seeing some tremendous traffic volumes trying to move back into the greater New Orleans area. People cannot go home at this time to Plaquemine or St. Bernard Parish. That's the extreme southeast tip of Louisiana, simply because of the water down in those areas and some pretty significant damage in terms of power lines down, trees, that sort of thing. Also because of existing weather conditions in St. Tammany and Washington parishes. That's the Slidell, Bogalusa, Franklinton areas across the lake. People cannot return to their homes in those areas. People coming from Mississippi and who want to go back to the New Orleans area can come in on Interstate 10 or 59, but they'll have to go across the northern part of the lake by taking Interstate 12 over to Hammond, down 55, and then come into New Orleans from the west side on I-10. It's going to be a lot of traffic. People need to make sure they've gassed up before they start because services may be sparse once they get into some of these affected areas. They just need to be patient. We know it's been a long 3 days for those evacuees. We appreciate their patience and cooperation. One more day, we may be past this.
Okay, thank you very much, Lieutenant Colonel Jones. As always, we appreciate your help. Slow progress. Hopefully tomorrow will be a much better day. John Hope, we're looking at slow progress, yes, but as you can see from Bill Keneally's situation, I guess this slow mover is still having its impact even on the tail end of it.
Well, you can see where Bill is there. He's right on the lake, and we have this strong northwest wind over the lake, and the water's accumulating down at the south and the eastern side of the lake, and that's what's happening right there where Bill is.
Pretty big waves for a shallow lake.
Yeah, I was thinking about that when I saw the video. I'm not sure you wouldn't think that was the ocean out there, but it's not.
It would seem like that today. We've got our satellite photograph showing maybe a little bit of a movement now from the center of rotation as it spirals its way onto the northeast. That's good news.
Well, Mike, it is moving, not very rapidly to be sure, 3 miles an hour, the last advisory says, and we expect a slow movement throughout the night. And what that's going to do, of course, is prolong the rain in a lot of areas where it's already raining heavily and has rained a lot.
Now we have George lowered to tropical storm status, but a 52-mile-an-hour peak gust at Jackson is nothing to laugh at.
Which is way inland.
And these reports of 33 in gusts around New Orleans, probably a little lower than what Bill Keneally's seeing right on the lake shore.
Well, I wouldn't be surprised. It depends on what the exposure is. But in any case, Mike, these winds are going to gradually subside.
There's good news on that. But again, we see the signature of orange and red. The high cold cloud tops is what that means. The colder and higher, the more orange and red you get. So there is intense rainfall out there.
Well, storm surge and everything is winding down, and what this is becoming now is what we really need to worry about is heavy rainfall and severe local storms. Those 2 items now.
Tornadoes, as we've had already in Panama City today with some damage and intermittent tornado reports. And of course that intense rainfall, which tallies out to over a foot so far near Pensacola, and even some reports of 25 inches around Milton, Florida. We're looking at these cells for possible severe weather.
Those are the ones at the moment, Mike, that concern me the most. Some of these over here east of Mobile, too, have cleared up quite a bit. But right in this area here, some of those storms are very nasty.
Let's take a look quickly at the expected impact now of the hurricane.
Well, what we've had so far is this is all winding down. Now we're talking about not as much of a storm surge. I guess we don't have that frame up, Mike. Here we are. Storm surge out here in the western end of it, 2 to 4 feet, something like that. And then 2 to 5 feet here from around Gulfport, Mobile, Pensacola, and only 1 to 3 feet over here. Although some pretty good waves coming up there, but all that's going to be winding down. And then in this whole area here, heavy rain expected over the next 24 hours.
So it's not over yet. Yes, it finally made it below hurricane strength, George did, but still the severe and terrible weather continues.
Well, heavy rain and severe local storms, and again, the storm surge is going to be subsiding. But you saw over there in Mobile Bay, where Kristen is, that the water can't get out of the bay, even though the winds have come down some. Still a strong southeast wind across Mobile Bay, holding the water up at the upper end of the bay.
Okay, John Hope, thank you very much. We'll keep you posted. John will be with us every half hour to let us know where the trouble spots are with continuing coverage of Tropical Storm George. When not on the TV, if you're on the internet, it's weather.com for the latest from the Weather Channel's website. Now back to the studio.
We constantly monitor